3 Lives 3 Worlds. The Pillow Book. Lower volume. Original work by Tanki Gongzi. English translation, Hamster 428. English editing, Rock Harlequin, Lily, Joanna Kuang. Note: this chapter is the continuation of the Pillow Book Lower Volume Chapter 11. Part 3 Arania. Chapter 1. Night wind was chilly. On the shimmering surface of Shuiyu Swamp was a reflection of the bright moon. Crowding balo trees reached for the sky along the bank. Every inch of this holy forest was shrouded under a cold desolation. At first sight, this scenery was no different from that in recent memory. But given that snow fell perennially in Fanyan Valley, Shuiyu Swamp, being on the outskirt of the imperial city, should also be covered under a thick layer of snow. Yet there was not a snowflake in sight at this time. For this space was actually a dream. Arania's dream. Although this dream was as consistent with Fanyan Valley as a mirrored reflection on a water surface, the real Fanyan Valley was interconnected to the rest of the vast world, stretching to infinite boundaries. This place, on the other hand, was nothing more than a corner trapped behind a wall. It had been more than 3 months since Donghua and Fengju had been trapped inside this cell. When she entered the dreamland, the protective barrier Fengju created from what was left of her fairy energy was destroyed. Once her 30,000 years' worth of cultivation was gone, her body weakened considerably, and she became no different from a mortal soul. When it rains it pours. Unexpectedly, Arania's dream was a place of numerous sinister sentiments. These sinister thoughts gave birth to many small demons who fed on people's life source. Fengju was a delicious meal to these starving demons. By the time Donghua passed the pythons to reach her, her snow-white face had completely drained away. Looking at Fengju in this state, Donghua's mind suddenly went blank. He had always known she was a troublemaker, but he didn't expect her to be so reckless. He left the Tiankang cage with her because he thought he could still guarantee her safety no matter what peril she was in. Apparently, he hadn't given enough consideration. He knew she was persistent about obtaining the Saha fruit, but according to the books Zonglin gave him, she had done many even more outrageous things just to satisfy her gluttony. It was said King Kaihu suffered poor harvesting 1 year when she was young, and the loquat trees in the kingdom did not bear fruits. Nonetheless, behind her house stood a great loquat tree whose fruits were plump and sweet. Living nearby was a small greedy wolf. After he stole a few fruits from her, she had relentlessly hunted him down for 3 whole years. Because of these previous records, when he asked her what she needed the Saha fruit for, and she answered she wanted to taste it, he immediately believed her. Moreover, he discovered he was increasingly disliking to see her together with Yan Chaiwu these days. Of course he was none too happy. Thus the night Jihan came and pleaded to him for the Saha fruit, saying only this fruit could help her cure the Qiushui poison in her body and that she hoped he would grant her this grace. He didn't give too much thought and at once agreed. It wasn't something that needed extra reflection, he thought. At the time, he was preoccupied with something else. How could he take care of Yan Chaiwu without staining his sword? It really wasn't an easy thing to make him disappear completely from Xiao Bai's side without her becoming suspicious. Fengju had always been special to him. But for the longest time he did not question these feelings of his, or perhaps he didn't have the time and effort to question them. Moreover, this kind of thing was different from annotating Buddhist scriptures. Sometimes, not trying to understand might actually bring the answers. Sometimes, it's just about fate. Dong Hua startlingly realized what that fate was on the day of the competition. At that time, seated high on the terrace, he glanced up and saw Fengju throw her classmate off the snow stake with only a few moves. When she sheathed her sword back into its scabbard, her cherry-colored lips secretly curled into a hidden smile in an effortless manner which made him thought for the first time of her queenly position in King Kaiyu. At that moment, in his mind emerged 4 words, Duan Zhuang Shu Jing. Respectable and demure, there were times she could be this way? This was a new discovery for him, an interesting one, in fact. A nervous Bianiao maid served him warm tea. He raised his hand to receive it and lightly took a sip. By the time he glanced back, she had stopped smiling. It was as if she felt her smile had been improper. While no one was looking, she softly bit her lower lip, then swept a glance as though she was afraid someone had seen it. Because her lips were luscious, the light bite left a pale indentation that gradually flushed pink again like an ivory pistol in early winter. Propping his chin on his palm, he suddenly felt that if he must pick a queen, Fengju wasn't a bad choice. He froze for a moment when this idea came to him. Then he gave it careful consideration. No, it couldn't be said that she was not bad. Rather, it must be said that in this whole world, she was the only suitable one. In other words, she was the only one he could ever like. When his thoughts drifted to this point, he realized the meaning behind his recent actions. It turned out he was thinking about this matter in such a way, thinking about her in such a way. It turned out he liked her. But why out of thousands of people did he only like Fengju? He thought about it for a long while and at last concluded it was because he had good vision. Because his sight was keen, he was able to discover her a diamond in the rough. He wanted to like her, and so he did. To say that his feelings came easily would be true, but to say they didn't come easily wasn't wrong either. Whatever the case may be, he just had to be here right now and Xiao Bai would be all right. The atmosphere in Aranya's dream was peaceful, but outside, Fanyan Valley was shrouded in a hazy state. That day, Dong Hua Daijun unhesitatingly mounted heavy lightning and furious thunder to enter the enchantment that trapped Fengju. His action had both shocked and confused the prostrated crowd waiting outside the Python formation. The shock lay in the fact that Daijun had been in seclusion for tens of thousands of years. Although for unknown reasons, he paid special attention to Fanyan Valley and regularly came for lectures, he never once used force while he was in the valley. In the past, Daijun had wielded his sword atop the ephemeral world with a valiant arrogance. This image was actually only retold in legends, no one could ever really imagine how he had looked even in their dreams. 70,000 years ago, Daijun didn't make an appearance for the war against the ghouls either. For what reason did he unhesitatingly let go of his fairy energy today to enter that dream? This was indeed shocking. Among the prostrating courtiers, quite a few had heard of the rumors regarding Daijun and Jihan. They had previously wondered whether there were some sort of unknown tales behind Dong Hua and the musician. But how would that explain today's scene? This was indeed very dubious. After a moment of shock and doubt, these loyal small fairies suddenly became enlightened. Only the blue sky above could be compared to the king's eminence. Only the sun and moon's combined brightness could shine like the king's grace. How could someone so noble and virtuous be tainted with worldly dusts? Jihan along with the imperiled Zhuge certainly had nothing to do with Dai Jun. The king was risking everything to rescue Princess Zhuge, all because of kindness, the kindness of a noble deity. How dare they hazard ill thoughts about the noble and virtuous king with their vulgar minds? They felt so ashamed, so very ashamed. On one hand, they reflected on their vulgarity, on the other hand, they looked on to see what danger was looming inside the force field. Next, they rubbed their eyes. They were given the view of the noble and magnanimous king, who was gravely injured, unhurriedly raising his hand to Princess Zhuge's face. Their ashamed hearts skipped a beat. Perhaps this was how one expressed concern for a junior? But only a second passed when they rubbed their eyes again, straining to see, as Dai Jun naturally helped Princess Zhuge tuck away her stray hair. He watched the princess a while and then gently pulled her in his embrace. Again, their ashamed hearts skipped a beat. Perhaps this was how one expressed concern for a junior these days on Zhuge. But instantly afterward, they vigorously rubbed their eyes again to see Dai Jun's lips grazing over Princess Zhuge's forehead. There was a short pause, as if he was soothing her, then his arms tightened around the princess. The shame felt by the kneeling courtiers dissipated like thin clouds. They held back their breath, their hearts were boiling wild. Could it be that Dai Jun's heart had flustered? His Majesty the King's heart could fluster? His Majesty the King's heart flustered and they caught him in action? They really hit the jackpot today. What happened thereafter no one knew. While they were caught in their excitement, thick clouds pulled in out of nowhere, covering the force field by Jiayu Spring. In front of their eyes was only an inky thickness. When the inky clouds receded, Dai Jun and the princess were no longer seen inside the force field. Only 4 pythons were left to stubborn guard the fragile crystal sphere, never stopping to fume poisonous air. The pythons' eyes carried in them both fury and sorrow. They intently stared into the force field as if they were waiting for Arania to appear again in the soft blue light. Red tears streamed down their copper bell eyes, as if they had waited a long, long time. They looked so terrifying but also pitiable that it was somewhat sad. With Dai Jun inside, Lian Song was naturally the highest ranked among those standing outside. The Bianiao Queen together with her subjects looked up in wait for Lian Song's decision. The third prince squeezed his eyes for a while then tapped his fan on his palm. You have knelt here for quite long, I'm sure everyone is tired. Why don't you go back for now? However, please remember you didn't see or hear anything today. If I happen to hear anything repeated, the consequences for that mistake, he raised his brow and looked around, I'm afraid would have to be shouldered by the entire clan. His words were polite, but in the softness lay hidden blades. It was exactly Lord Liansong's way of doing things. The queen and her subjects bowed to receive his order. They were quaking in their boots when they stood up, and after a distance, still didn't stop quaking. Liansong Jun carried the reputation of a playboy and was often misunderstood as someone untrustworthy, but those from older generations across the lands all knew that whenever crises arose, Lord Liansong was far more decisive than his father. Out of Tianjun's 3 sons, it was widely known that the second prince, Sangji, was the most intelligent and gifted. That was because when he was born, 36 5-colored birds from Mount Junji soared to the sky, circling the queen's chamber and dancing for 81 days. But Lord Liansong's supporters felt that the third prince's intelligence was even more remarkable than the second prince's. It just so happened the third prince was born undersea. His auspicious omen was swimming fish in the water rather than flying birds in the sky. Furthermore, when the third prince was born, the outspread flood that gave Tianjun headache in those days suddenly subsided. This was also a proof of the third prince's phenomenal birth. The third prince did not have the same influence as the second prince, but that was because his third highness was humble. He did not want to compete with his brother over meaningless fame. Of course, being an amorous man, Liansong didn't quite know how humble was written. To use this word to describe him was an outright lie. But if we were to speak of innate talent, he was really a bit better than Sangji. He did not contend with Sangji for the title of crown prince in the past because he had the wisdom to make himself seem incompetent in order to avoid burdensome responsibilities. That way, his life could be happy and free. But there were such things as unpredictability in life. Although Liansong reached enlightenment at an early age, who in this world didn't have a few friends? Risking life for one's friends could happen from time to time. Sometimes, one couldn't run away from responsibilities. For example, this time. If His Third Highness wasn't here to helm the situation, if rumors spread about Dong Hua being seriously injured, or the possibility of his dying, the world could be shaken. Although Dong Hua had retired and no longer dealt with worldly affairs, for as long as he stayed inside Taichung Gong, he would be a deterrent to the irrepressible demon clan. Moreover, the ancient gods from prehistoric time had concealed too many secrets about world creation. Liansong, too, feared that if Dong Hua's prospects were really ominous, he wouldn't know what would happen once rumors spread. Liansong closed his fan and softly sighed. To ordinary people, 1,000 fengjues wasn't worth even one of Daijun's fingers. His last words were too nonchalant. Apparently, he didn't know that to his subjects, this was a bad business deal. However, although Liansong's orders could make the Bianiaos leave in fear, if he wanted to threaten the demon lord Yan Chaiwu, he was still lacking a bit. In Xiao Yan's words, he grew up on threats and menace. How could Liansong threaten him with mere words? Moreover, Liansong was too much of a gentleman. Xiao Yan didn't hear anything threatening from what he said. He did immediately leave, but only so he could send Princess Jihan back. Without any warning, Dong Hua had held Fengju so gently in that force field that even Xiao Yan had felt startled for a moment, much less Jihan. As Xiao Yan recovered, he saw Jihan's face draining away like a white parchment. She was biting her lips, almost bleeding herself and forgetting to even wipe the tears streaming down her cheeks. Her look of complete devastation worried him so. Xiao Yan was a brute. Slashing people he had done, comforting people he had not. But since Jihan was his beloved, he decided to give comforting a try. He found a small ring of pines and set Jihan on a stone seat in the center of the forest. He thought seeing lively things might help her feel better at this time. Old tears were still on Jihan's eye corners when new tears came out, gushing like rainwater, washing away the layer of makeup on her face. It pained Xiao Yan. He was pained, but he felt Jihan indeed deserved to be the person he loved. She was still so pretty in her ruined makeup. Xiao Yan was still thinking on how to approach her when he heard Jihan speak first. Tears on her pale face had not dried. Sounding somewhat cold, she said to Xiao Yan, "You think I'm funny, don't you? It was this way that year with Minsu, it's still this way today with Dai Jun. You look down on me, don't you?" Xiao Yan was flattered and somewhat surprised that Jihan cared about his opinion of her. He momentarily could not control his excitement as the corner of his mouth inadvertently twitched upwards 3 degrees. This appearance in Jihan's eyes was no different than a ridicule. Jihan lowered her head and stared at her hands. At length she said, "You do think I'm funny? You stayed to bring me back, but you're actually staying to ridicule me? If you've seen enough and laughed enough, go away. I think I'm funny as well." She pressed her lips tightly and said no more. Jihan kept saying she was ridiculous, making Xiao Yan's heart weigh heavily. He felt a little aggrieved, but also a little angry. Although he knew Dong Hua and Feng Zhu arrived at this point because of his effort, and it was also what he wanted, hurting Jihan wasn't something he wished for. This, of course, wasn't his fault. Feng Zhu was his friend, it wasn't her fault either. Then, it could only be Dong Hua's fault. Xiao Yan's eyes burned brightly. He clenched his fists and angrily told Jihan, "There's nothing to laugh at you for. 1,000 mistakes are all Ice Face's fault. It was he who promised to marry you, although by leaving on the wedding day, you might not have made him happy, but you have lowered yourself to him already, but he still would not change his mind. How unreasonable of him! You don't need to be pained by him." Here, he felt this was a good time to pry the corner and hastened to add, "This old man. I mean, I heard a very good poem from the mortal realm, let go of thy past memories, cherish the one in front of thee. You should also set your sight from Ice Face and turn to someone else." When he finished, he looked to Jihan with loving eyes, while inwardly trying to see if he had remembered the poetry lines correctly. It was difficult to wax poetic like this. Unfortunately, Jihan didn't pay any attention. She only stayed quiet for a moment and then suddenly said to him, "I'm not Suyang's true sister. My father was actually a water serpent from Mount Beishui. You may have heard of his name, he was the fiercest warrior under Daijun during prehistoric times, Mengao." Tears gently rolled down her face. She sounded hoarse. Xiao Yan blankly looked at her, not understanding why she brought up her family history all of a sudden at this time. Suyang's sister wasn't really his sister. This was indeed quite maddening. Normally he would be very intrigued, but at this time he was waiting for Jihan's reaction to his confession. Then Jihan told him something totally unrelated. He felt a bit hurt. Is he being ignored? Of course he had heard of Mengao's fame. During Dong Hua's campaign to unify the 6 realms, he was head of the army, a subordinate under Dong Hua's throne, a strategist who by sitting inside his war tent could win from thousands of miles away. He had always been well regarded by Dong Hua. Later on, when Dong Hua retired to Taichan Palace, Mengao and the other generals also went into seclusion. But in legends, the places that these generals retired to were the best mountain ranges in the lower realm. Why did only Mengao Zhenjun go to a god-forsaken place like Mount Beishui? Jihan looked to the distance and slowly said, "My father fell in love with my mother and parted ways with Daijun to go to the Southland. But the Red Demon Lord used my mother as a bait and ambushed him at Mount Beishui. With the Dragon Lock, he imprisoned him in the White Lake, where he remained as the protector of the Long Nao plant months after months, years after years. Mother never told me about these things. Then 300 years ago, when brother punished Minsu to Mount Baishui, I snuck there to save him, and that was how I found out. Xiao Yan gradually took interest in the story and momentarily forgot his grief as he continuously nodded to her words. No wonder nobody knew Mengao Zhenjun's whereabouts after he went into seclusion. It turned out the famous general suffered defeat due to a woman. It was really a case of suffering defeat due to love. Jihan's hollow eyes revealed a pain inflicted by bygone memories. To save Minsu, I was attacked by numerous venomous creatures on Mount Baishui. Hundreds of them bit into me. At this, she slightly shuddered. Xiao Yan could not help but also shudder as he listened. My life was on the brink when it was father who broke out of the dragon lock to save me, she continued. However, he was also fatally poisoned. She choked back her tears. Before father passed away, we met Dai Jun. Father entrusted me to him, begging him to take care of me and treat the Qiushui poison in my body. Without looking at Xiao Yan's shocked expression, she went on, Father knew I loved Minsu, but he thought royal brother Suyang would be as wicked as his father. Even if I saved Minsu, it was still a hopeless trap, as Minsu would certainly be brought back. He asked Dai Jun to marry me so that brother would let his guard down. Then I could take advantage of the 2 months of marriage preparation to prepare our escape. Father expected if I returned, no matter where I went, my brother would patrol me more tightly, so only a marriage could help. He begged Dai Jun to marry me that night to cover for me and Minsu to escape. She looked up to Xiao Yan. Dai Jun has always valued the men who fought alongside him during prehistoric times. So when my father asked him to help protect me on his deathbed, he gave his promise. Her voice was getting hoarse, her eyes full of sadness, welling with tears as she went on. Even Zonglin, who is Dai Jun's loyal attendant, also felt I must repay Dai Jun for the kindness he has bestowed on me. When Dai Jun came to Fanyan Valley to lecture, he often allowed me attend to his needs. If not for that, I wouldn't have fallen in love again. Throughout these 200 years, I sink deeper and deeper each day into this tragic situation. In this world, there's nothing easier than loving Dai Jun, but there's nothing more difficult than receiving his love. On Zhukongtian, Zonglin was very caring toward me, yet these days I can't help but resent him. She buried her face into her palms, tears seeping through her fingers. In hindsight, Zhi and I weren't any different, but funnily enough, I used to hate her. To Dai Jun, there are only 2 kinds of women in this world, the one who can be his queen, and everyone else. There were times when I wondered why Dai Jun didn't make me into that special someone. But today I finally understand, there's actually no such thing as karma and reason, it's all luck and chance. Xiao Yan was quiet. Most of the things Jihan said were completely different from what he knew. It made him very confused. He thought he needed to straighten his mind a little. In daylight, desolate snowfall blanketed the sky. The green pines stood tall as though they had existed for thousands of years. At length, Jihan raised her head. Her face no longer carried a feeble misery, but her complexion remained somewhat pale. She faintly told Xiao Yan, I am telling you so much today because I hope you will let go of your feelings for me. She hung her head and said, you must think I'm being ridiculous to arrive at this conclusion after thinking for so long." She clenched her hands, her fingernails seemed to dig into her palms, but her voice stayed light. "Since I like Daijun and have persisted for more than 200 years, I still want to have a try at this love. Who Daijun chooses is still not definite." Xiao Yan quietly looked at Jihun's bleeding palms. He wanted to hold them, but decided against it. He thought for a while and suddenly understood Jihun's meaning. The king didn't like her, yet although she was sad, she still intended to fight that battle again. This came as a shock to Xiao Yan. On one hand, Jihun was so beautiful that it was ridiculous I's face didn't like her. On the other hand, intuition told him this was a good thing. His heart suddenly felt uplifted. The road to pursuing Jihun seemed to have become a lot smoother overnight. If this was the case, he didn't need to rush. If Jihun didn't pay attention to him, he could wait. The more beautiful one became, the easier it was to be muddled. But no one stayed muddle his whole life. But Jihun was so beautiful. What if she stayed muddled for over long? He was a little hesitant. Xiao Yan scratched his head. Himself so muddled, it seemed he couldn't help a muddled Jihun. If she was bent on winning Donghua back, nothing of concern should happen for now. He also needed to have some time for himself. Gazing to the moonlight from the eastern mountain, if he was not mistaken, several hours had passed. He wondered if I's face had brought Fengju out or not. Xiao Yan frowned at this thought and then hastily ran to Jiayu Spring to look for them. When he arrived at the spring, he was baffled at what he saw. Xiao Yan remembered that when they were at Jiayu Spring the first time, everything was laid in ruins, the water in the stream had also been muddy. Only a few hours passed and above the peaceful ground now formed a lake. Surrounding the center of the water body were 4 pythons and the Arania Dream. It turned out Fanyan Valley had its share of capable hotshots. Xiao Yan rode on a cloud into the air to take a look at this genius. This genius was the third prince. On the rising waves were a marble table and chairs, and a concluding chess game. His Third Highness was holding a stone while leisurely conversing with Meng Xiao. The monstrous waves laid tamely under his solace like domesticated hawks. Xiao Yan spaced out for a while as he recalled the heavenly clan's third prince was the water god of the 4 seas. Logically speaking, not only should he be able to move the lake that held the force field trapping Donghua and Fengju in a short amount of time, even 10 lakes would be nothing for a water god in charge of the 4 seas. It was just that he always saw Liansong dressing so opulently. He thought nepotism was at play when Tianjun granted him this title. He now witnessed with his own eyes that Liansong was indeed talented. Xiao Yan flew to the waves and heard Meng Xiao reporting to Liansong, although it is possible to rescue someone by entering the dream according to legends, in reality, I heard the dream contains unpredictable perils. Reportedly, there was someone who also went inside the dream but didn't know the rule that disallows magic. Not only was he unable to save his friend, he also made the dream shatter and ended up going to the underworld with the person he came to save. Meng Xiao knitted his brow and lowered his voice to a whisper, I'm very worried. Daijun's magic is remarkable, but Arania's dream does not tolerate strong magic. The chances of this entire matter were slim to begin with. They've been in there for quite a long time. I'm only afraid Daijun and Princess Jug's prospects are more grim than good. Xiao Yan stumbled on a wave and only heard Meng Xiao's first few words. He angrily said, "Didn't Ice Face say he will definitely bring Xiaozhu out?" He added in annoyance, "What kind of a dream is this? You all protect it like a soft shell egg that can't be touched. From what I see, since it's ominous no matter what route we choose, why not just crack it with a hammer and see if they're dead or alive? Except for his profound magic, there's nothing good about Ice Face. His magic can be used to protect Xiaozhu when the dream collapses. He's lived for so long, I don't see what difference it makes for him to have a few less years to earn money." His words led Meng Xiao to respond. Since Daijun's magic is useless inside Aranya's dream, compared to the two of them dying in the dream, although this way is desperate, at least it might work. Meng Xiao had been present at court for more than a century, so his observance was a little better than Xiao Yan. Although he felt more worried for Fengzhu, seeing that Lian Song seemed to believe in Donghua, he added, "Of course, everything would still be decided according to your highness." One was speaking from worry, the other from resentment. Compared to those two, the third prince was unmoving and perfectly calm. He began to gather the chess pieces and leisurely said, "Why don't we make a bet? I'm intrigued whether this dream can really trap Donghua. But you are saying that Donghua's magic cannot be cast inside Aranya's dream and he wouldn't have any other way. This, I don't very much agree with." The third prince put away the chess pieces into its box as he carelessly looked at Meng Xiao and said to him, "You are from here. You must have read 1 or 2 history books during your school days. Don't tell me you can't remember it was written in the annals that in prehistoric times, Donghua was the leader of the 72 generals." Meng Xiao flustered as he nodded. This question did appear on one of the exams many moons ago. Because he did not pass, the book remained in his memory many years later. If one of the 72 generals who served under Donghua in ancient lore reappeared today, no one would stand a chance. They were truly formidable. The third prince politely smiled. The generals in prehistoric times bowed down to Donghua because he was good at fighting, but for him to sit atop the world, it wasn't only due to his almighty magic, he pointed to his head, but also this. When he finished speaking, he whipped out his personal Jiu spear to gesture the bet and smiled to Meng Xiao and Xiao Yan, "Gentlemen, your wagers." End of chapter 1.